Hello my friends and welcome back to Player Display for another tutorial. I know it's been a little while since we've done one of those. So I've gone on and on about how much I love and adore wired capes, like we're starting to see McFarlane do some of their own, which is really great. But ultimately, when it comes to acquiring wired capes, it can be quite expensive. Like for example, I'm primarily at the moment a McFarlane collector, and if you want to get a third-party goods wired cape, they can usually cost from anywhere between 15 to 25, even 30 bucks. But after buying a few capes and studying how they were constructed, I actually learned how to make my own for a fraction of the price, and I wanted to share that with you so you could do that yourself. And one thing I wanted to share right off the bat is you do not need a needle and thread for this. It's very simple, and once you get good at it, you can do a cape in about 30 minutes. So really, it is not a very time-consuming process. Like when you go through your first batch, you might move a little bit slowly, but after you do enough of them, you're going to be pretty lickety-split. So over here, I have all the materials that I'm going to use to make one example of a cape. Of course, every cape is going to vary depending on what character you're talking about, what brand you're going with, and speaking of that, this doesn't have to be just for a McFarlane figure. It can also be for Marvel Legends, Black Series, even Hot Toys if you really wanted to. It's just a matter of you figuring out for yourself the proper scaling and everything. But once you figure out the size of the cape, the proper length and all that, the rest of the process is overall the same. So anyhow, with all that being said, let's first go through the ingredients of this cape that we're going to be making. I mean, firstly, not really an ingredient, but we have a figure here that I will be giving a custom cape. This is Ultraman from the recently released Superman vs. Superman of Earth 3 pack. So I'm going to take this cape off and replace it with something a little bit more bendable, and, you know, it's like a cape with articulation, as Todd McFarlane himself has said. So we're gonna mod this guy up and just make him a little bit more interesting. I mean, I really don't like these solid capes. Are very cumbersome. They really restrict what positions that every figure can be in. They make figure stands a little bit tipsy, so I do not prefer these solid capes. I know some people do, but this video is for folks who do not want to make do with these solid capes, and they want to replace them without spending too much money. So the next thing you're going to need is pretty obvious. You're going to need a fabric, and not just any old fabric. You want fabric that drapes very nicely. I've heard the word quilted being used, but you can see just how nicely this drapes over my hand. Very soft, very cozy. The best way to get capes like this, it's very cost efficient, is to go to Savers. Go to the children's clothing aisle, because those are the cheapest shirts there are, and then get very soft cloth like this. That's a little bit stretchy, it drapes over your hand well, you know, just feel around with the clothing, be sure it's got a nice draping feel to it. And once you get a whole bunch of shirts like this, even, like, obviously if you go with the more adult clothing, then you'll get more cloth for your money, but if you're trying to keep it very cheap, go with the kids' clothing. Especially if you're getting a color that you're only going to be using for a single figure, for example, like for my Green Lantern Alan Scott, who I've made a cape for. We'll look at him later. I just needed 2 shirts for the purple and the green, 2 smaller shirts, because I can't see myself using those colors very much in the future. But anyways, obviously over here, I've got some red, got a little kid shirt. Might want to give it a wash to get rid of any wrinkles, but I'm a little lazy, so I'm not going to be doing that. But yeah, you're going to need some nice soft cloth. If you want to go to like Joann's Fabric and get something a little more fancy, then you can obviously do that as well. Next, you're going to need, this is where you can have a little creative liberty, but for me, I prefer to have some type of stencil for my figures. So basically what I did here is I cut out a semicircle, and I used a third-party cape I did not make as a reference to create this semicircle of cardboard from the outside of a Bandai model kit box. I always save that cardboard because it's so good for so many things. And basically what we're going to do with this semicircle is lie it over top the cloth, draw a dotted line or a solid line around it, whatever you prefer, then cut within the perimeter of that line, and that's going to give us our cape. So you don't have to have a stencil. You can just eyeball it if you really wanted to, or you could just draw straight on the fabric, but for me, I like having a stencil. And you don't have to even do it out of cardboard. You can use a plate, you can use just any old round object to do it, but for this tutorial, I'm going to be using my cardboard template. Next thing you're probably going to need is a little bit of glue. I have some crazy glue here. Personally, I recommend something with a little bit more volume control. So something like Loctite glue that's more of a gel is a little bit better. Then you can just apply it to the shoulders of the figure. Use a toothpick to sort of lather it down a little bit. So because one thing is you don't want too much glue or it can bleed through the cloth and then you'll have a little bit of residue there and you don't want that. Next thing, this is the key ingredient, the reason why you don't need thread, which I dread. I hate using needle and thread a lot. This is what makes the process so much easier. It's double-sided tape, specifically Scotch tape, so if you want to go shopping for it, I'm sure you can go on Amazon easy, get a few rolls of it, and you'll have plenty. I mean, I've gone through 5 or 6 different capes. I still have plenty of tape left, so you don't even need that much, but this is what you're going to need in order to make your cape bendy and hold everything together. By the way, already like the third of the way through this tutorial, I totally forgot to mention the all-important wire. I'm not sure what gauge this is necessarily. I got this on Amazon in like a bundle years ago for various projects, but be sure it's a nice thick wire. The thicker the better, so that way it supports the weight of the cape. Like as you can see here, it's a lot of poses very quickly, so you're going to want something like that. And the color doesn't matter either. It's not going to be visible through the cloth. So I'm just getting a color I don't care about, being like this light blue, whatever it is. But I actually recommend getting a wire that's a different color from the cloth you're using, so it is easier to see when you're working with it. So totally forgot to mention that, but back to where we were. Next thing you're going to want is some sort of dark marker. Over here I have, what is this thing, a Prismacolor marker? No idea how I got this, I just have it. But like a Sharpie marker is good. That's what you're going to need in order to trace your outline on the cloth before you actually cut out your desired cape. So go with this, go with the Sharpie, just any dark marker is good. But that is a little tangent point. Let's say you want to do the outline method, but on a black cloth because you're making a black cape, a darker cape, a cape for Batman, whatever. Then an alternative is something like whiteout. The closest thing I have to that is these THREADLESS pens. I don't know what you'd call them, but it's a really nice pack. I got this from Amazon. It's helped me through several projects. Very good for accent work. But the thing in here that you might want, if you're going to do a darker cape, is you'll want this white marker. That'll allow you to trace a kind of hard to see outline, but still present outline on the black cloth. So we won't be doing that today, but say you're doing a darker color cape, then you're going to want something with a white that's a little brighter. So when you're cutting out on the inside of that outline, then you'll be able to see what you're doing, obviously, because black will not show up against black naturally. Next, you're going to need X-Acto knife. Enough being said, I mean, it's just for cutting off the cape from your figure. You may or may not need it. Maybe the base figure you're working with doesn't even have a cape to begin with, in which case you can totally skip that step. And then lastly, of course, you're going to need some scissors so that way you can cut out your desired shape. So anyways, all that being said, let's hop right in. So here we have Ultraman over here. I'm going to cut off this cape. That is step number 1. Assuming you need to do that. Personally, I do, so we will do that. One little cheat is you can warm them up with hot water or a blow dryer, but for me, I just like to do it straight up. I've gone through enough of these. Sometimes you can just get away with just ripping it off. And also, I'd recommend removing the head sculpt as well, but I've done this enough that I'd like to just do it straight up. So we got the cape here. I usually like to start with a very small incision, just like so. And then from there, you can kind of pull it as you cut away the plastic. If you leave a little excess behind, that's not an issue either. You could always, obviously, just go back in and then remove a little bit later on. So see, really simple. You remove that. I'll clean that up a little bit later. But now, let's see, I might be able to just pop these out. I cannot, so I'm going to take my knife, and you do want to be careful of the main body sculpt. You don't want to hurt that, so just be sure to stay away from the blue in this case. Again, going to vary from figure to figure what exactly you're cutting off. So let's remove the red. Don't feel like you need to pop off all the red. I mean, you want to keep some of that sculpt so that way your cape will have something to graft to, something to hold on to. So to leave a little bit of form, I'm going to keep some of that red in there. But if you do want to pop that totally out, then that is a place where hot water might actually help you. So let's get this side as well. Looks like this one might actually just rip right off. Not quite. And there you are. So as for the solid cape, you can chuck it, sell it, whatever you want. I just throw them out. I have no use for them whatsoever. So anyhow, here is Ultraman. And you can do a little bit of cleanup work. You can cut down a little bit of excess plastic on these two areas around the collarbone. I will trim down this backpack a little bit. There we are. Now we got a capeless Ultraman. Such a weird character. But anyways, all that being said, let's move on to next steps. Now, I'm not going to do this totally on screen because, frankly, it's quite boring, but next step is to just cut out a nice length of the cloth. You definitely go more than less. You can never have too much cloth when you're starting to make a cape, but you can certainly have too little. You don't want to cut it too small, and then you've wasted your cloth. So basically, if you have just a straight up shirt like this, you're going to want to cut within the stitching work. So, for example, I found that it's best to turn a shirt inside out for starters. So we'll do that over here. So pop out the sleeves and everything. And that will make the stitches nice and visible. So what we're going to do is, there are some weird logos on the inside, so I'm going to be using the side of the cloth that does not have the logos on it. I'm just going to simply cut inside the stitch work, because we're not going to want that on our capes, obviously, unless you do. I mean, it might give it a nice little bit of texturing, layering, whatever it is that you want out of this cape. Again, you can get as creative as you want. You do not need to follow my instructions exactly, but anyhow, yeah, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to cut all the way around within all the stitch work, and then also cut off the bottom down here, so that way we have a nice foundation of cloth to start doing this cape. So I'm going to do that off screen. It's a pretty boring process. It's pretty easy to do. I don't think you need to see that, so let me take care of that. Okay, so I've cut out that length of cloth. You do not need to be very clean about it at all. You can see it's a little bit rough around the edges there. But one really great thing about the taping method is that it requires some folding over the edges. So, for example, here's the template that I'll be working with. Let's say the cloth that I cut along this line over here is a little bit rough. That's okay, because we're going to be folding this part of the of the cloth over the wire onto the tape, and that's what will allow everything to bend. So if this line that you cut isn't the smoothest, not going to matter anyways, it's going to be tucked in, so you won't need to worry about that. But anyways, here we have our cloth, and now we're just going to lie it down. Very nice. One thing I forgot to mention is every now and then a logo or something might sneak up on you, especially if you're using a shirt. Like over here, I got this little go dry sticker or whatever going on there, so I'm actually going to need to avoid that. So let's say we take the template and put it on here, and I can actually avoid that. So as you can see here, it's small enough that it's out of the way of that logo, so that's going to be cut right off. Sorry, that's a little off camera. So that logo is going to be cut off once I do the outline with this template, and then I do my scissor work, so that's not going to be a problem. So next step is make a template. If you haven't done that already, be sure you do that. If you do want to do it. If you don't want to do it and just grab a plate, slap it down, trace it, that's fine. But if you want to be a little more specific like me, then I recommend taking your cardboard, lining it up with the figure, and making it a little bit longer than the length that you get from the base of the feet to shoulder length. Make it just a little bit higher, especially since you're going to be bending the cloth over the wire later on. You're going to want a little bit of excess, so that's a good thing. Again, you want a cape that's a little bit bigger than you want, not too small. So that's what we're going for here. Now, next step, assuming you got your stencil, if you choose to use one, all you got to do is lie it down. And one thing I actually did is I left the big old seam line that we got down here at the base of the shirt, because that means it's going to be sort of like a guiding line for me initially. So instead of having to draw that in, it kind of already created a perfectly straight line for me. So we're just going to use that. But anyhow, we got the cape over here, and now we're going to bring in our black marker. Again, it doesn't really matter what brand it is. It kind of does. Be sure it doesn't bleed on the cloth. Like, you might want to test it. Like, for example, I'm going to drop it here a little bit. It's not the most visible from where you are, but it's not bleeding in the cloth or anything like that. So what we will do here is quite simple. We're just going to pin down the stencil very well. You don't want the cloth dragging as you draw. And I'm not going to do just like do a straight line, otherwise they're going to shift everything around. Just do little hash marks. That's the way I do it. You can also do dotted lines, or you can do brief strokes in between. It's kind of what I'm doing now. But I'm just going to be drawing some lines across. Again, you can be a little messy because we're not going to be cutting exactly alongside the line. We're going to be cutting on the inside of it, so that way the Sharpie or whatever remarker you're using is not visible in the final product. So we're going to do our best, just get this outline here. Oops, drew a little bit on the template itself, which is totally okay. I don't really care that much. And see, notice how I'm moving my hand along the stencil to keep it in place. That's very important. And There we go. And I don't need to draw this line along would technically be the outside of the cape, I guess, because we already have that seam there. But what we gotta do is remove the template, and there we go. Now you got the base shape for your cape. So next thing you gotta do is pretty damn obvious. You just gotta cut it out. So this is where you do want to move a little slowly. You don't want it to be too rough around this line. But for this one, the straight one over here, it's not as huge of a deal, but basically just hold it up to the light, getting your hand nice and cozy, and what we're going to do is, as I've said before several times, is cut inside the line, not on it and not outside of it. You want to cut that line away from the general shape. So we're going to do that. I'm actually going to do the whole thing. I'm going to speed up the footage, so you get an idea of it, but you don't have to hear me rambling on or anything, just to shorten the video a little bit. So here I go. Now here's one important thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut right along this excess here, so that way we get all this extra cloth, and then we can put it aside. So that way it's not throwing off your weight as you're cutting out the rest of your cape. So put that extra away, and now we'll have plenty left to use for another figure if we wish. I do actually have another planned one on the way, so that'll be very useful. But now we just cut along this seam line and rather cut it out. Again, I'm going to be a little cleaner here. Again, this is the line that doesn't matter as much, but still going to try and keep it nice if I can help it. And bada bing. So this little piece of cloth, I'll probably just chuck it. In fact, I'll do that right now. We don't really need that. And let's have a look. If I can get these scissors off of my hands, there we go. Let's have a look at the cloth we have, and it's a pretty beautiful semicircle. Not exactly perfect, but once it's draping off the figure, you're not going to really be any of the wiser, so I don't mind that as much. But if you do want to fix your symmetry, then what you can do is fold it in half from corner to corner and crease it down. Be sure nothing's overlapping or anything, smoothing it out. And I don't really care as much, but as you can see here, if I pick it up, I got a little bit of excess coming off. So I could cut that off if I wanted to. This next step might not seem like much at first, but it is direly important because this is going to be what centers the cape on the figure later on. So let me actually tilt down a little bit. As you can see, I've got my ruler here. I know the perspective is a little off because of the camera, but basically I use the 6 to pretty much eyeball where the center of the cape might be. If you want to be a little bit more tedious, you can use whatever measuring tools you've got at your disposal, but for me, I just eyeballed it. And what you want to do is be very gentle with the cloth. Get a marker, the same markers you were using before most likely. Go to the very center of this flat line that you got in the cape, and do a line. Very small, doesn't need to be big at all, just like that. As you can see, I've got some excess over here, just ignore that. We'll go ahead and extend that, actually. Actually, if the line's a little long, it's really not a big deal. You're probably going to be cutting it away anyways. Speaking of that, that's the reason why we're talking about this line at all. We're going to be cutting this line into most likely what's going to be a Y shape. Now, you're going to need to be a little bit thoughtful about this. So basically what I mean when I'm saying we're cutting out a Y is quite literally, we could do a longer line and then do two lines that branch off of the end of the Y. So one this way, one that way. So it looks like a shape of a Y. So that means when you go ahead and cut exactly along that Y, then you got your wire, then you can fold the creases that the Y has left behind over the wire and over the tape, so that way everything stays together around the neck. But in this case, because I'm doing a Superman, we're going to do a modified Y. So I am actually going to bring in my stencil again. So instead of just doing a straight up Y, we're going to actually cut out a square here, more of a rectangle rather, and I'm going to bring it out a little bit deep into the cloth, not too far, and then I'm going to cut off the lines that branch out from those two corners that we got from that rectangle. So again, I'm going to eyeball this. I'm not going to go too crazy. In fact, I'm going to bring in my ruler again, and let's say I'll do a quarter of an inch from the line on either side, just like that. I'm going to be using my template again, just to be sure I have this right. Again, there's going to be a little bit of excess cloth that's going to be folding over the rest of the cape, so I do need to take that into consideration. But as for the main line itself, that's about 1.5 inches, so we will do that. The nice thing is when you guys go to do it, you're not going to be recording like me, so you can take your time with this. You don't have to worry about a big old camera in the way. I don't know why I'm saying by a big old camera. I'm using a phone, but you're going to do the other dot right there. And that should be enough for me to cut out what I need. And as for those little lines or branch off, I'm just going to eyeball those in as well. Make them at about half the width of the tape. It doesn't need to be that long. And there we go. That's pretty good. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for that whole Y debacle. But basically later, we don't have to do this right now. You're going to cut so that way you got the rectangle, remove it completely, then cut out those lines so that way you've got those fold over pieces for when you get the wire in line. So on to next steps. The next thing you're going to want to do is get your wire and shape it out, which is one of the most tedious parts of this entire process. One thing you can do, like I've got my stencil here, I kind of use the green marker in order to indicate exactly where I will be adhering that wire to along the cloth to sort of give me a gauge. So that's something you can do, but these aren't totally accurate, so ignore those. Don't worry about any numbers or measurements on there. Again, I'm just going to eyeball it, but basically start off by going at one end, and you do not want it to be directly along this line. You don't want it to be flush. You want it to be on the inside. So you can see it right over here. We're putting it on the inside of the two sides of this cape that we have over here. So we're going to place it right on the inside. I guess you're going to want it to be like 0.5 centimeter from each side. That's where your end is going to begin. Pin that down, and then very gently with your fingers pin things down as you start to move the wire around. So as we get over here, again, this is going to be an area that folds over right there because we're going to have a line here. We're going to cut that, and then this little area is going to fold over. So that means we want this wire to bend up so it meets the outside of this little line that we got there. So I'm going to pin this down with my thumb, bend the wire up. I know it's hard to see for you right now, but we'll look at the final results later, so don't worry about that. Then we got that on the outside of that line. I'm going to pin it down with my finger again. And it might not be a perfect corner. If it's not, then you can always just pick it up, retool it a little bit, and that should be a little bit nicer. Also, if the wire winds up being a little bit longer than you expected it to be, then you can always trim that down before you fold everything over, so don't worry about that. But anyhow, we got that wire going over to that side right there, pin that down, and oops, let me do that manually. Gets a little tricky around the neck, so that's why I'm going as slow as I can. Lie that down once more, and it should be a little bit more lined up. I still have the spool of wire on me because I'm cheap. I don't want to waste any wire as I do this. And then again, have it go down until it hits about 0.5 centimeter away from the cloth. Bend that up. Move the cloth a little bit. Stretch that out. Yeah, there we go. And let me be a little bit more particular, so I'm going to bend the corner in a tad more, straighten that out. The wire doesn't have to be perfectly straight either. It's not going to be very noticeable. Lie that down, and that's not too bad. And I forgot another element of this tutorial. You're going to need some wire cutters for like one single step, which is taking your wire and snipping off any excess that you might have. Got rid of that spool. And then there we go. Now you have an idea of what the wire is going to look like. So I'm going to take some time, straighten this out to make it a little bit nicer, if I can help it. And then we should be able to just kind of lie it down. Yeah, looking very good. Again, be sure that the wire does not meet the edges of the cape. It's got to be on the inside of it all, so that way you have a little bit of excess cloth to fold over later on. So that's very important. But it's a pretty decent sized wire. I like this. I'm actually going to trim off a little bit of extra over here so that way there's an equal amount on either side. So wire cutters, just do a little bit. Yeah, just like that. So anyhow, let's talk about some tape. Next thing you're going to do is put your wire aside and work on the tape. I guess you could do one first or the other, but if you do the tape first and then you're trying to shape the wire, and the tape's going to keep sticking to the wire, it's going to be a little awkward. So anyhow, let's get our tape right here. And we're literally just going to put it right across the entire length of this flat edge of the fabric. So get a good length. Again, eyeballing it. If you want to be more precise, you can measure the tape first, but I'm just going to take it. Again, a little extra is fine. Something like that is good. Yeah, and I'm going to rip it. And I'm just going to take each end between my thumb and my index and lie it down just like so. There we are. You can see you got a little bit of excess cloth more towards the center. I could cut that out if I wanted to, but again, we'll be folding it in. We could do that later on, so that's not a huge deal. And obviously you can't just like slide it all down with your finger to be sure everything's stuck, but what you can do is get a little tool, like, I don't know, I got some pliers right here. I'm just gonna tap it, be sure everything is staying down very nicely, just like so. That's pretty good. And that's not all the tape you're going to need. You're also going to need to put some tape along these folds that we're going to be having, so let's do that as well. If you have tape overlapping other tape, that's totally okay. So we're going to put that on the inside line. We're going to be cutting out that rectangle later, so put that right there. Yeah, again, it's going to be a little bit fussy if you put your hands randomly down because you got the tape there. It's just going to be sticking to you all the time, so be aware of that. Another piece of tape here. I'm going to put it right on the outside of that rectangle we'll be cutting out. I should have drawn the rectangle. I apologize. That would have been made things a little easier for you to visualize what's going on here, but it'll be a little bit more obvious once you start doing our cutting, so don't worry about that. And then one last piece of tape for this top fold, again to mark out the last side of that rectangle, just like that. And the reason why we're doing a rectangle is because we have a character like Superman where the cape kind of branches down over the neck and then to the collarbone is, well, exactly for that reason. And also you're going to have a little bit of flesh exposed. So that's why you're not always going to need to do this exact shape. Sometimes you can get away with just doing a line, then two lines branching off of it. But in this case, you need the rectangle and then two of the lines. That's going to satisfy most characters, I'd imagine. But do a little bit of experimenting if you want, like get some scrap cloth that you don't really need, test out different shapes before you get them really nice stuff and do the real thing. So very important. Now let's get our scissors before we apply the wire right here. And I'm just going to cut out that rectangle along the implied lines. Again, I should have drawn those in first, but I know where they are, so that should be enough. So there's the first one. Then I like to just do the one parallel to it right here. Sense of geometry helps. And then I'm just going to pull this up, cut across. Oops, let's not cut the main cloth that we want to keep. And there we go. I got a little excess there. Doesn't matter. If it's a little bit sloppy, it's going to be in the back, so I don't mind. And also it's going to fold over anyways, so you can get rid of this little piece of cloth here. Well, there you go. That was a little off camera there. And then lastly, as we talked about before, we're going to get those little branch off lines. Cut those. And they should be pretty simple. Don't cut too far, obviously. Again, I'm just kind of doing it, but if you want to be very careful about it, then you can get a ruler, mark it up a little bit. Again, any dots that you do on the inside of the tape, they're not going to be visible once you fold everything up, so you can do whatever you want from there. But anyhow, we can move right into the next step, which is, again, quite tedious, but you got to take your wire here, which we have already pre-shaped, get your cloth, now you got your tape, and you should be able to just lie it down. So take the corners of that rectangle that you sculpted from the wire and lie them down across those two branching off lines. Take the lower corners and put them again on the inside of the edges of the fabric. Pin that down a little bit. And then we'll start with this side over here. You see the wire's a little bit off because of the way we were moving it. So let's straighten that out a little. Pull this cloth back out, and if everything else starts bending up with you, don't worry about that, but yeah, we're just gonna gently press everything down. 1 minute. I mean, you get the idea. We just got to go slowly about it. Let's see here. Let's get it nice right in the middle of the tape. Kind of bend it down as you go. And there we are. There's one piece of the wire all set. And we're going to do the same on this side over here, which might be a little hard for you to see. Sorry about that, but I'm gonna do that as well over here. And there we are. We got all the wire laid out, and you can see that's kind of pulling everything up. That's good. That means that everything's adhering the way that it should. And next thing you got to do is very simple. You just need to fold everything over the tape. And then the tape is, for the most part, not going to be visible. If there's excess that bothers you, you can remove that. I will show you how later, but remember we cut out those 2 lines. It's so that way you can take your little pieces of taped cloth and fold them over like this, which is pretty nice. It's like a little bit of origami, I guess. And one thing you might want to do is get a tool like something flat, like tweezers, get the back end of it. And what you can do is kind of just push the cloth down more closer to the wire, so that way everything's sticking a little bit nicely. So you can do that. Next step, you can either fold in these inner edges first or fold out the outer ones first. It doesn't really matter, really your preference, but I guess we'll just work from the center out. Let me angle it right so that way you guys know what the hell's going on. I'm going to take this one, fold it over, press it nice along that corner there as well. That should be nice. There we go. And once again, I'm going to get the tweezers and then just gently press it down a little bit more against the wire. We'll do the same thing over here. Right there. You can see I didn't do it perfectly. It's not like a perfect rectangle. It's kind of branching out, but that actually might be kind of nice for this Ultraman. So anyhow, do that once again. You can also just like slide it along like this. So like just slide it directly across to pin everything down really nice. Whatever way you prefer to do it. Actually going to bend the wire in a little bit, and you can see everything holding together really nicely and how premium this cape is starting to look, even though I'm just making this on a whim. But as for the longer ends, I suggest starting with the middle. So we'll just press that in along the tape like that, and then just do a little bit at a time. So do that here. And that's a nice thing about the cloth that we're using, because it doesn't really fold over on itself, and if it does, you can rub it down against the tape and it won't be as visible. So it's okay to make a few mistakes here. Like, you got a little bit of extra tape showing up here, but that's something you can clean up if you're careful enough. And again, get the tweezers. I'm just gonna graze it on down. There we go. So that's one side, and now everything's secure. I could just spin this thing around, and then we'll do the exact same thing here. Here we are. So we got this whole cape done up, and one thing, again, as I said, you can do, you can remove excess tape if you want. So basically you just get like a tip of your tweezers right here. It helps to like fold against the tape, if you get what I mean. So then you can sort of peel it a little bit. It's a tedious process, which is why I probably won't bother, but I just want to show you how to do it in case you want to do it, which you most likely will. It's not going to damage the cloth at all, unless you're really rough with the tweezers, but the tape coming off of the fabric is not going to damage the fabric. So if you need to redo anything, then you can absolutely do that. So, like, there we are. So now, just for sake of example, I got that extra tape there. Just be sure you're not cutting the cloth, and I can just cut away that extra tape if I wanted to. So that's not an issue. Throw that away. And now, let's see what we have here. We got the wire all done. You see we got a little bit of a pocket there. You can squeeze that out against the tape, and it should disappear a little bit. Bend it around a little bit, and it's better. It's not perfect, but again, it's not going to be exact. If you're using thread, it probably won't be there. But again, this is just meant to be more cost-effective and a little faster. So that's why we're doing it this way. Again, I got some extra tape. I might actually work on getting rid of some of the tape. So let's do that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about applying it to the actual figure. Okay, did a little bit of cleanup here, like you peeled up some excess and then cut that away. Again, you got total creative license. Like, I'm done here for the most part, but if you want to go any further, take your time to do it. Just be sure you're not cutting any of the fabric that you do want to keep intact. But we also have these corners that are popping up. That doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. If it does, you should feel free to just cut them away. It'll make for an easier graft with the glue. So do the other one as well, right here. Just like that, and those will make it a little bit easier to glue things on with them out of the picture. So, and then just be sure to flatten everything down so it's on the tape once again. So I think we are okay. I mean, obviously it's missing like an Ultraman logo on the back. I can help you there if you can figure out how to make your own stickers, and that's an easy way to do it. Like, get one of those sheets that you could stick in the printer that are adhesive or something like that you could print on any logos you want. You can get Ultraman logo, Superman logo, whatever the hell you want, Batman for some reason. But yeah, again, you can get as creative as you want. But anyhow, as for this cape, I think we're done here. So let's get it on Ultraman. So here we have the cape and the figure, and we're going to just basically try and do a trial run here and shape it out before we start actually gluing everything on. So as you can see, the corners are a little bit wide at that 90 degrees, so I'm going to bend them in so they're a little bit tighter, more of an acute angle. And it looks nice because it starts to naturally fold over on itself, so you get those natural Christopher Reeve looking folds on there, or really any Superman. I mean, Christopher Reeve is Superman. Fight me in the comments. But you see, that's just a little bit nicer right there. It feels a little more natural than just this. So feel free to just shape them up a little bit. Try to hit like a 45, maybe 30 degree angle. Again, you could be a little more particular if you want. So you go in a little more. There we go. So that's going to go over that red sculpt that we had before, as will this one right there. And we're just going to glue it right on. Don't worry about the back popping out. You're just going to bend that back, and then it won't be visible anyways. So anyhow, let's get our glue. Where the hell did I put it? There it is. I don't have much left in this bottle. I got another one, but I'm going to be tapping this off, it looks like, today. So really nice glue, too. It's got like this little pin system to plug everything in, so that's pretty nice. But we're just going to do one side at a time and be very slow about it. I'm actually going to move the face so we don't any glue on that. That's why I recommended popping off the head first, but I don't feel like doing that right now. So let's get our glue, and I'm just going to administer a little bit. Keep it thin. You don't want it too heavy so nothing bleeds through. I mean, it's going to be like two pieces of cloth folded over each other, so it won't be too big of a deal. There we go, just a little bit. And our nice thing about this specific crazy glue is you use a cap and then put the glue aside just like that. So then we got our corner. I'm gonna slide that onto the glue right there, I think. Actually, should have gone a little further in. I have time to move it. Yeah, just like that. Okay, so there we go. There's one side done. And let's do the other side, exactly the same. We're just gonna take our glue, administer some more. Spread it out with the nozzle a little bit if you can. Don't want it bubbling over too much. I probably could have removed a little bit of extra plastic, but I don't mind that much. Spread that out. And fortunately, the cloth is the same color as the plastic, so it's not a huge deal. I'm actually going to bend that in a little bit more and get your chin out of the way. And then bend that in a little bit. Pull the cape back, and there we go. So now, let me first get rid of my glue. You don't want it just clinging to something and dragging crap around. So let's put the crazy glue out of the way. We are done with that. If you want to add a little bit of extra, like maybe you want it more glued over the shoulders, like right around here, you could do that as well. But just around the collarbones enough. So now what I'm going to do is just hold these two parts down, go to the back. You got this part popping up. Bend it back. You can see I probably could have gotten away with doing a smaller rectangle before, but it's on the back. I really don't care that much, so that's all right. If you make that mistake and you do care, what you can do is sort of bend up that line and then press in those corners. And then you'll have some folds, but then it'll be a little bit more flush with the flush right there. So that's something you can do. And turn around, you're not going to notice anyway. So let's actually put our camera back up so you can get a better gauge of what's going on here. How's Chucky, by the way? Have you enjoyed seeing him in the background as we've gone along? But anyways, the cape is now applied. Let's center the head a little bit, and we will just bend the cape over the shoulders, and look at that. So much better than this, in my opinion. I mean, they could just have it doing whatever you want, basically. You can also do a wire down along the bottom. I haven't done that before, nor do I prefer it. I just find it adds a little bit of tedium to the process, and I wouldn't use it much anyways. I just like a cape that drapes naturally down. But yeah, we can have them flying, doing a punch to the side or something like that. Looking pretty good. And we can just take both ends, bring him here. You could even like pull that up. We don't have a flight stand right now, but you get what I mean. And he looks pretty damn cool. So a lot of things you could do with these capes. Now then, there is one more thing that I did want to talk about. So let me get him vanillaed back up very quickly. There are some special cases when it comes to these capes, so obviously I can't demonstrate everything over here, but I did want to talk about those quickly, so I'm going to bring in some other examples. Okay, to wrap things up, here we are with some special cases. They just required a few extra steps to get them to the caliber that I preferred. You don't have to do them exactly the way I did them, but they are in the picture if you're considering making your own capes. So first thing, let's say you want your cape to have a lining, meaning it's a color on one side, it's a color on the other side. You modify the steps that we just went through ever so slightly. Basically, you're going to be cutting out two pieces of cloth that are exactly the same shape. You're going to want to make them a little bit shorter than what we talked about before, because instead of folding the cloth over on the long side of it, on the straight side, you're simply going to be laying one piece of cloth directly over the other. And then in turn, you're going to already going to have your paint, your tape and your wire, and then you're going to have your cloth on top and then a piece of cloth on the very bottom. So it's going to be like a sandwich almost. So you're going to pin that down. So it's going to be cloth, tape, wire, cloth. Then you're just going to lie it all down. And you're going to want to do the exact same thing going around the bottom of the cape as well. A perfect example is over here. We have our Bat Family 5-pack Batgirl, and she was the most difficult cape that I've ever done of all the ones I've done thus far. As you can see, it is yellow on the inside and blue on the outside, so you can actually see the wire over here. The cloth is not folded over. It is simply sandwiching the wire on the tape in between two pieces of cloth. So that's pretty interesting. But you do need to do a little bit of folding towards the center. Let me try to explain this. But basically what I did here is I cut out a rectangle in the yellow portion, but on the blue, I did just a Y. Not the rectangular Y that we did with Superman, but just a Y shape. So that way, I was able to fold the blue on the inside over the yellow, so that way it would be a little bit less cloth going on, and then it would also go over the wire in turn. Can't really demonstrate that now because this figure is already done. If you need any tutorials specifically for any of these more varied capes, then we could do that in the future if I have a figure that requires something of a similar caliber later on. But yeah, if there's any modified version of this tutorial that you'd want, let me know. These are special cases that we're going over, but anyhow, if you want a cape with a lining, make two pieces of cloth, make them a little shorter than what we talked about because you're not going to be folding over the top line, and be sure that you cut out a rectangle on the inner part of the cape towards the center, and then do a Y on the outer portion, so that way the outside color folds inside the inside color, if that makes any sense. And then do some tape along the outside as well. And speaking of that, let's bring Batgirl in again. Another special case, let's say you want to do like those iconic bat corners or bat ridges or whatever. You want to add a pattern along the bottom of the cape. Really simple. Before you apply tape, before you apply cloth, before you apply wire, fold the cloth exactly in half, and then just cut out the triangles, cut out the little arcs, whatever it is you want to do, and then it'll mirror over on each side. In this case, I actually had to do the tape first, and then fold it, so that way when I cut everything out, then it would be cutting exactly the same shape on either piece of cloth that we had over here. So she's two different things going on at once, which is really cool. So that's why I love this cape so much. But my next favorite cape is over here with the Alan Scott Green Lantern, where over here, again, we got two layers of cloth over here that make up the main cape, but we also have this big old collar. So that brings me into the third special case, which is, again, first we had the inner lining, then we had the bottom pattern, and now this time we have external elements like a collar or a hood, whatever it is you want. I haven't done a hood before, so I can't tell you how to do that. But as for this collar that we have over here, I did sort of a trapezoid shape, and then I glued it on first as a separate element, and then I turned the cape around it in order to hide any of the glue work. Like, as you can see here, they're not part of the same cloth, they're separate pieces. Came from the same shirts, but they are done totally separate. So I glued down the trapezoid to start, and then I put the cape on top of that. So if you want to do a hood or an extra extended collar piece, that's what you need to do. Again, there's other ways to do it. Like I even tried doing wire, but I found that I didn't need it, and it was just making things really cumbersome. So I pulled the wire out, and it's just sitting upright with the tape alone, and it's totally fine. So again, it's going to vary from figure to figure depending on what you want to do. As for this last one, it's a special case, but it's so unique. It's not going to be anything you need to do. But here is Owlman. This is the Crime Syndicate version, and I just wanted to show off what I did here. You can get really crazy. Like over here, I gave him this almost mechanical looking wing design, so that's something that you could do. I just got like strips of cloth, and then I individually glue them down on his back one by one, and that allows me to make these mechanical looking bird wings, which is pretty fun. So it doesn't always have to be an exact cape. You can do a whole bunch of different types of shapes and just have a lot of fun with them. If you want a review on this guy, let me know. Just a little tutorial. I can tell you how I did them and everything, but I'm just showing them off because just to give you an example of how far you can go. So this is just one of those finer examples. He was really cool to do. Actually, I think he's dry enough and ready for me to post him up, so I will go ahead and do that. But yeah, so if you want any more specific tutorials on any of these varied types of capes, or maybe if there's another type of cape that we haven't talked about, let me know in the comments. I could try to help you out. Or if it's big enough an issue, then I'll just make a whole other video on it, assuming that I got a figure that needs that treatment. But yeah, this mod, again, it works with absolutely any figure you have, any scale. You just need to be sure you have the right size template, assuming you want a template, and then just go for it. I mean, there's so many ways to do it. Also, a protractor might help. You can use that to draw out the circle in order to make your cardboard template if that's the route you want to go with. There's just a lot of little ways to do it. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. I know it was a long one. It's going to be a bitch to edit for me, but if you've got any suggestions yourself about how to improve this method, because again, it's just my method, let me know in the comments so other people can learn how to improve their capes, make the process a little bit easier, a little cleaner, whatever. But this is just how I've come to do it. And here we have like two like $15 value capes, maybe $20 value capes on eBay, and over here I've just got my own craziness going on. So there you go. A lot of fun to do once you learn how to do it. It would be a lot faster if I wasn't recording it, but that Superman cape, I could have gotten that done in like 20-30 minutes really simply, but I want to do the video, show you the full process, and now you can make capes to your heart's content, I hope. But then again, if you've got any questions, let me know. I'll help you out. And yeah, that's about all. So if you enjoyed this tutorial and it's helped you out at all, then please let me know. And if you enjoyed, then please, as per usual, be sure to like, comment,
ring the bell to be notified of our latest arrivals, and subscribe.
This is the editor speaking, humbly reminding you to support the pod Patreon in the description to guarantee new content every single week.
Thank you guys very much for watching. Rock on, and I will see you all later.